Now on to our top, the show. I got a letter from forwarded to me from one of the listeners. Thank you so much for that, for keeping us up to date what's going on. You guys are the greatest audience in the world. I mean, you guys are talented. You know what you're doing. You know what you're dealing with. And what we need to do on this podcast is give those people who don't have a voice. And so we want to be able to impact the industry in a way that makes change happen, but positive change. In other words, if legislation is the issue, which we have to deal with, and a lot of this, and then bring that to the attention of everybody who can listen and give a voice to the voiceless. So thank you for that. We're looking at second generation rodenticides that are under attack. The warfarins and all that, for us, pretty much it's gone. We're not using it unless you have a specific situation. For general stuff, we're getting the contract. We're using the final blocks. And those are all second generation rodenticides. And what's happening is that it's under attack. But why? And the letter pretty much stated about the products that are being encouraged to use. And the letter from it's from the British Pest Control Association, sent it to their government, basically asking them not to remove the second generation rodenticides because they're up for, I think in 2017 from a 2008 progression in Europe and in the UK. And what we're looking at is we're dealing with the same thing basically in California. And why? Well, when you and I, as a pest control operator for general household pests and structural pests and commercial pest control, when we think of products, most of us are really careful, especially when it comes to rodenticides. I know there's some people out there that just don't care, but most of us who, especially if you're listening to this type of podcast, you care to do the right thing. And you're not going to throw a rodenticide in the middle of a landscape because the customer doesn't want to pay for rodent stations. In the state of Florida and many other places, you have to have either the rodent station attached to the floor, and it has to have a weight on it, or an internal weight, something that keeps a little child or a small pet from being able to tip that over and get the rodenticide out. The trap is going to keep other animals like cats and raccoons and stuff from being able to get in there and get that bait out. And most of us are doing the right thing. I do walk around in a lot of places still, and I'll find loose rodenticide packs, like in a storage facility. The management is actually doing their own rodenticide work in the building. And they're just taking the rodenticide and putting one rodenticide pack in each storage room. I got a big problem with that because it says keep out of reach of children. So what happens when you're moving your stuff, your kid sits on the floor, like mine, I got to be on top of him, 24/7. He's 2 years old. Everything he finds on the floor, he wants to put in his mouth. And he sits there in a corner and pops open that bag thinking it's Pop Rocks and starts eating the rodenticide. I think there's a huge problem with that kind of mentality, just throwing. When a customer takes, blocks final, because he can buy it online, and he takes it and he throws it underneath the crawl space, and it's not even sealed. And the cat can get down there, and the neighbor's dog can get through the fence or whatever. A child can crawl in under there and eat the rodenticide, or even worse, you get a raccoon that dies under there, and then you're dealing with the smell. People throwing it in their attics because they don't want to put traps. Those are the things that I applaud the government for, the steps that they took in removing rodenticides from over the counter and allowing people to buy them. There's still some manufacturers fought it. A lot of people fought it. But, sometimes it just lets me see, when you fight something like that you see homeowners who have no training in what a rodenticide does. They have no idea what an anticoagulant is or a neurotoxin. There's no knowledge. Second, they just don't care about the environment and just throw it out there. They misuse it, misapply it. And then when something happens, oh my God, what happened? The outcry. It's always that way. So we have to go at licensing. We got to get training. We got to get certification. We got to carry insurance. And somebody can go over the counter, buy the same product, misuse it, misapply it, overdose it, and there's no consequences unless something happens. And manufacturers are fighting it, and I'm asking why. Why are you fighting? Because your sales are going to go down. That's the bottom line. So you really don't care about people's safety, and you don't care about the environment. You care about your sales. And there's some that fought it, and they're not going to, the government had to withdraw their registration for the product because they wouldn't voluntarily do it. And so those are the people that are actually doing it wrong, and they don't care. They don't understand. The homeowner. When I walk into I am looking at a building, and the cases are all turned over. There's no weights on them. The law, how far back did that law go into effect? And there are people still pest control operators, who don't put weighted stations down. They just use the same old stations and put them outside. They don't care. I've seen rodent stations where I've opened them up when I'm going to go do an inspection on a building, and the bait hasn't been replaced. They've just been dumping more bait to the point where the bait is spilling over the side. I've got pictures of it, and they don't care. And those are the people that put us in the spotlight like we're morons. But the biggest problem is not the CPO. Is not the pest control technician. Is not the biggest problem with rodenticides goes back to, this is what you need to know, goes back to agriculture. The biggest consumer of rodenticides is agriculture. About 90%. Not commercial. Not residential. When you tell a customer you got to spend, $100 in stations, and it's going to cost you, if you don't have a pest control service, I got to make a trip out here. It's going to cost you $65 every 2 months to monitor those stations, replace the bait. They're like, no way, I'll go do it myself. And then go buy those little ones that you got to throw away now that you can't refill. And then why are they still selling the little blocks in packets? I think it's ridiculous. You either take it all off the market or put it in ready-to-use stations that are not removable, that the customer has to toss it out and get it by another one. He's not allowed to touch the bait or the bait packs. It shouldn't be allowed. But it's wildlife. And why wildlife? And what's the problem? When we think of that damage, we don't understand that it's when you have acres and hectares of crop that you need to protect because rodents do damage to it. You're putting out a lot of rodent bait. And here's what happens. When you are in a wooded area, or you're in a cropland and there's owls, and all of a sudden a rodent dies from eating the rodent bait, then that animal comes, which is a raptor animal or a scavenger animal, and eats it. They get contaminated with the bait by eating the animal. Happens to mountain lions. So all of a sudden a raccoon eats it, and here comes a mountain lion and eats the raccoon, and they get contaminated by the bait. And this is where the big problem is. It's not whether it's your pet or your children that are at risk. It's all the wildlife that they're finding the toxins in these wildlife, and it's affecting them. Because it's agriculture. And I think there needs to be a separate treatment for what's available for wildlife to use, for agriculture to use in rodenticide, and what is allowed in commercial, because it's totally different. We're not impacting the environment. We're not making that big of an impact on the environment by not doing this. And we're getting lumped in together with them. And they have to do it because they got to protect those crops. And I understand it. So what was the solution for Britain to do? Everyone that wants to apply, there is no over-the-counter rodenticides available for over-the-counter, period. Second of all, if you're a farm owner and you want to apply a rodenticide, you got to take a course, like a regular control operator. And you got to know how to apply those rodenticides. You just can't throw it out in your cropland. And once you get your certificate, then you can apply it and buy the product. If not, you got to hire a certified operator that has taken the additional certification required for rodenticides. And you know what? I have absolutely no problem with that. I know people are going to throw their hands in the air and say, it just puts additional regulation and it's going to raise our prices. Really, one farmer, maybe with 10 hands, that have to go take a course. They can even do it online because the course is available online. Does it really put that much of a demand on you to know what you're doing and why you're handling that chemical that can potentially kill somebody? Because a lot of the rodenticides, there's no anticoagulant for them. So if a child eats it, an animal eats it, there's no rescuing them. That's the problem. And that's my question. So California is looking at following this. And they're watching what's happening. And they're going to look at it. Are they getting results? But I think that if you're a farm owner, you shouldn't just be able to go buy a rodenticide, throw it out on your cropland, or do whatever it is you do without knowing what it is that you're doing. You should be held to the same standard that any professional is held to when he has to apply these products. That's my point. And I think that's what we need to look at. So, look at I got a bunch of links on rodenticide fact sheets from California, living with wildlife and rodenticides. And I understand. Look, California's got a tremendous amount of wildlife living together with residents. I mean, your mountain lions are coming down to where residents live. Bears are coming down to where residents live. All kinds of animals. But the majority is agriculture. And I think there needs to be a separation. I think that the associations need to say, wait a minute, let's have a separate law, one for agriculture and one for commercial application. You shouldn't be allowed now, because here's the other problem. If you're a resident, you can buy it online. You don't have to. I mean, they banned it in stores. Big deal. You can go online to 2 major suppliers online, buy them, and still apply them. And you can buy it in bulk, which is much scarier, to have a bucket of rodenticide bait sitting in your garage where your kid can pop it open, or, somebody can pop that open and just, oh, look, we can play with this. That's really scary. And so, that's where we need to go as an industry. I think we need to, one is make distinction is it agriculture or is it commercial that's doing it? Is it residential? Because I have a podcast that we did, Yo and Ate Us. You go back and listen to that, where 90% of the product applied, 95% is applied to agriculture. The other part, 8-10%, is done by homeowners. And less than 1% of the chemical is applied by pest control operators. Why are we taking the rap and still being quiet about this when it's not us doing it? And it's not an issue of pointing fingers or pointing the blame. It's not a criticism, it's an observation. This is where we're at. And I think we need to stand up and we need to point these things out and say, look, unless you take a training course, Mr. Resident, unless you take a class, you're not allowed to do your own pest control with certain of these products because you're going to kill somebody. And that's fine. Once that happens, people are going to look and say, it's not really worth it. I'll just hire somebody to do it.